Member for Mount Lawley.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. My grievance is to the Minister for Planning. Minister, my grievance today regards the local effects of the McGowan government's pursuit of higher density residential developments and redevelopment in Perth. At the outset, I want to differentiate what I will shortly come to from the shrill naysaying of the member for Cottesloe. Far from objecting to... Acting Speaker, I'm not taking interjections from the supercilious scientists from Struggle Street.
Member for Cottesloe. Members.
Far from objecting to these kinds of higher density developments, in my experience, people who live in the inner city understand the reasoning for increased density. They simply worry that developments might occur in such an ad hoc and ill-considered fashion that our communities become disjointed, discordant and, frankly, dangerous places to live. I'll refer to two examples of where you have already had experience of the sophisticated approach that residents in the electorate have to these issues and the solutions that you have provided, Minister, before turning to the broader theme that these examples highlight. As you know, Minister, the electorate of Mount Lawley is one that is increasingly witness to the implementation of the state's plan for higher density housing, in particular along major corridors such as Walcott Street and Beaufort Street. We're also likely to see more in the future along Wanneroo Road, Morley Drive and the railway line. Last year, Minister, you heard representations through me from the Mount Lawley Society regarding the scheme amendment for Beaufort Street. I facilitated a meeting between the Society and staff from your office. And Minister, you made amendments to the scheme in response to those representations. Now, I think we have to concede the Society didn't get everything they wanted, but they were, firstly, satisfied that they had a fair hearing from you, secondly, sufficiently satisfied with the outcome, and thirdly, satisfied that a decision had finally been made on the Beaufort Street scheme amendment after years of inaction from the previous government. Good but not great, I think we would characterise their attitude to the compromise we were able to achieve. The second example I turn to is that of the prospective redevelopment of the property on Field Street that's vested in the Drug and Alcohol Authority. The land was advertised last year for redevelopment and I immediately had constituents from that street and neighbouring streets contacting and meeting with me about the plans for the site. What I ascertained from them was that they were very keen to ensure any development doesn't detract from the streetscape and, importantly, to the greatest extent possible, retains existing trees. Again, I contacted your office and advocated on behalf of my constituents. Your department then reissued the advertisement with additional conditions, particularly regarding the retention of those trees. On the 7th of February, the local newspaper, the Perth Voice, published a front-page story claiming that the City of Stirling and the state government are, quote, at loggerheads over plans to sell off an old drug rehab site in Mount Lawley. The Voice had suggested that, quote, the McGowan government is preparing to offload land as part of its revenue-raising drive. But it would be wrong to think that the government's plans are unpopular. Indeed, the Mount Lawley Society president, Paul Collins, is quoted extensively in the article, and I quote, restricting the site to single residential R20 so close to the Mount Lawley town centre would be a huge opportunity lost to increase the vibrancy of the Mount Lawley town centre, Mr Collins told The Voice. A single building of apartments, opposed to 5 single residential buildings, would also provide the opportunity for a better architectural outcome from a heritage perspective for a prominent site. The Society acknowledges that if the single residential density of our side residential streets are to be protected, then density needs to occur on sites like this, in a manner which is a win for everyone, including those who support tree retention. What is clear, Minister, from the Mount Lawley Society, and is clear to me from discussions I've had with constituents across the electorate, is that people in the seat of Mount Lawley, as opposed to the member for Cottesloe, have a sophisticated and nuanced attitude to higher density development in our community. In conversations with local residents, many of their concerns can reasonably be assuaged by such things as the condition your department has imposed regarding the retention of trees. People I speak with know that high density is a necessity to prevent urban sprawl, but want developments to be sympathetic to the aesthetic qualities of the community. And in that regard, Minister, I refer you to an answer that you gave to a question from my colleague, the member for Perth, last week when you said this: our vision is for access to public transport, good public open space and density in the right places, but retaining the character of the suburb. And Mount Lawley as a suburb has a wonderful character. I urge and hope that, and I'm quoting you again, I urge and hope the councils work with the state to make sure that we can implement this vision, because we do not want to destroy the character of any suburb. We want to retain character, but get the infill right, with density in the right places, livability, and again, letting small businesses, and members would know of my advocacy on behalf of small businesses, letting small businesses have access to more people to grow their businesses into the future. people I speak with want established trees to be conserved wherever possible. And I note in this regard as well, Minister, the Better Urban Forest planning policy developed by your department and the WA Local Government Association. While the condition imposed on Field Street has attended to concerns about tree retention, I wonder what might be done to ensure that the design elements of any proposed structure lead to delight rather than despair from neighbouring property owners and the community at large. Minister, what assurance can you give the people in the seat of Mount Lawley, be they in the suburb of Mount Lawley or Yokine, Dianella or Morley, that the McGowan government is dedicated to ensuring their concerns are heard regarding developments that enhance rather than detract from their community?
Thank you. I thank the member for Mount Lawley for that grievance. And I think as many members, in particular in the inner suburbs, are grappling with the overall government objective and overall community objective of driving density, but also understanding the concerns of their community. And it is a balance that we are striking to get right, and it's a balance that I know the member for Mount Lawley's been engaged positively in reflecting many of the concerns in the community. And if I look around, actually, the member for Joondalup too, of course, is also trying to work with government, as is the member for Kingsley. They're the ones currently which have these concerns in front of them. The member for Mount Lawley has an active community group and who are very engaged in the issue of keeping the history of the area intact and making sure that amenity continues to be improved. But I would say that many in that area, and also Vincent, Stirling, surrounding areas, accepted the targets of the previous government and have been working to try and achieve those. Unlike some other areas who basically have never accepted the targets set by the previous government, not by us, and just basically walking away from the table. You've got some councils, or many, or most councils actually, who are engaging positively on this issue. I'll talk about the Field Street property first. I understand some of the representations made on the Field Street property, but I think the actions we've taken so far, which has been highlighting the need for tree retention and requiring the preparation of a local development plan from the city, is part of making sure that the zoning, together with the tree retention, actually creates a better outcome. And I think people have to really start understanding that some or many of the decisions in the past, which has just been subdivision, wholesale subdivision, has seen the villas, the driveways, basically whole blocks being covered by driveways and roofs. That's basically it. And you see it throughout the suburbs. So that is where we create some amenity issues in relation to parking on streets. It's also where we actually get issues to do with the loss of tree canopy and vegetation. So we have to not fear height, because in many instances height means you keep your vegetation and your tree canopy, and that's what the level of sophistication we need to bring to the debate. But it's also about having the right tools, and this is one of the issues that we're working on. And so as part of when we won government, the work had begun on the Design WA apartment guide. And to be quite honest, I was engaged, but I also wanted to make sure we understood how this apartment guide sat in the entire suite of documents. So in my view, you have your sort of Greenfields neighbourhood policy, you have what is going to be the precinct policy that we're working on, then you have your apartment guide, medium density, single res. To me, that is the pure picture. So I would have started at the top and gone down, but we really knew that people were calling on us to finish the apartment guide, and that's what we've done. And of course, along with the apartment guide will be the guides for medium density, the missing middle, which often is raised by planners, architects, community and councils alike. The aim is to really have guides, and I'll talk more about the precinct policy, because this is where the challenge is. When we go into older suburbs and you have existing residential areas, you have existing common open space, schools, and how we can actually create that density in a planned way, and we don't look at each block by block. We actually look at the precinct and how we can improve the overall amenity of the area, and take into consideration the history of the area, the tree canopy, road access, and of course public transport. So that is the aim, and it's going to be a long journey, but I think people all accept that the old way of getting density is not the right way of actually delivering the level of amenity that we want in our suburbs. We also, of course, this week, and I know, member, it's something that you've been calling for, is the release of the Design WA Apartment Guide, and many members of this side have really appreciated its release. Basically, what this apartment guide looks at, the high density product, the built form in a sense, and what are the minimum standards we expect in those apartments. It's been done in New South Wales, it's been done in Victoria, and we looked at what worked well and what didn't work well. But there are a number of things. From the external point of view, it's about building separation, which is a big issue, that in particular when you saw some photos of some developments over in Melbourne and Sydney where you had balconies pretty much touching each other. So the issue of separation, the taller the building, the more the separation, issues of setback, issues of public open space and common space are all being addressed through the Design WA Guide. Other issues in relation to the interaction of the ground floor with the street, and this is one of my concerns, is that we're providing a bit more flexibility. In many instances there's been a requirement that all ground floor is commercial, when in many instances it doesn't lend itself to be commercial, and you create actually bad spaces with no or zero interaction with the street. So we've provided a bit more flexibility on that. Minimum sizes for apartments. We've got new requirements for, or new conditions in relation to ventilation and natural light. Parking, for example, the ability or the need to have new requirements to allow for electric vehicle charging for vehicles, a number of new measures dealing with the concept of the 3-bin policy, making sure you have space for those 3 bins, more sustainability aspects. We're making sure that we are building the apartments that deliver on the community needs today but also for the future.